Picture this. You've got $47,000 sitting in your savings account. You've been grinding for years, cutting back, skipping vacations, driving the same beat-up car your friends make fun of at every cookout, and you're almost there. $47,000, $3,000 away from a number you told yourself would change everything. But here's the weird part. You're terrified. Not excited, terrified. Because somewhere deep in your gut, you're starting to wonder if crossing 50 grand is actually going to feel as different as you always imagined. And honestly, that fear is completely valid, but it's also completely wrong. And today, I'm going to show you exactly why.
My name is Nico, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some high earners stay stuck while others build real wealth. If this video helps you see money differently, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up, because what I'm about to walk you through took me years to actually understand, and most people stumble across it way too late. Here's what the internet gets completely wrong about saving money. Every article, every influencer, every well-meaning financial advisor out there treats savings milestones like they're all the same. Like going from $0 to $10,000 is the same psychological and mathematical journey as going from $40,000 to $50,000. And that framing is dangerous because it completely misses what's actually happening inside your brain and inside your brokerage account when you cross certain thresholds. Most people have no idea this even exists, this idea that there are specific dollar amounts where the rules of the game fundamentally change. Not just a little, not, oh, nice, I have more money, change. We're talking about the entire architecture of your financial life restructuring itself around a new foundation.
I've talked on this channel before about the $20,000 threshold. That first moment where you stop living in pure survival mode and your nervous system starts to breathe again. But $50,000 is a completely different animal. Think about it this way. $20,000 gets you off the ledge. $50,000 builds you a house on solid ground. And the difference between those two things, psychologically, mathematically, and practically, is so enormous that people who haven't experienced it genuinely cannot conceptualize it from the other side. That's what we're unpacking today.
Let's start with the psychology, because the math won't make sense until you understand what's happening in your brain. Here's where it gets really interesting. When you're living below a certain savings threshold, let's say under $30,000, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term planning, risk assessment, and complex decision-making, is running at genuinely reduced capacity. This isn't a motivational metaphor. There's real research on this. Financial stress physically degrades your cognitive bandwidth. A 2013 Princeton study found that the mental drain of financial insecurity is equivalent to losing about 13 IQ points. Sound familiar? That fog you feel when you're stressed about money isn't weakness. It's your brain redistributing resources toward immediate survival at the expense of strategic thinking. Now, here's the part that will blow your mind. When you cross $50,000 in savings, something neurologically significant starts to shift. Your cortisol levels, the stress hormone that keeps your threat detection system on high alert, begin to meaningfully decrease when your financial cushion reaches what researchers call the extended buffer zone. $20,000 gives you a basic buffer. $50,000 crosses into extended buffer territory, which means your brain stops treating everyday financial decisions as potential emergencies. And when your brain stops treating everything like an emergency, it gets dramatically better at the thing you actually needed to do: think clearly about your future.
The practical consequence of this is something I call brain space expansion. At $50,000 saved, you start having conversations with yourself that were literally not accessible before. You start thinking about career pivots not as fantasies, but as calculations. You start evaluating job offers differently because you suddenly have the mental bandwidth to think beyond, does this paycheck cover my bills this month? You start approaching relationships, big purchases, and major life decisions from a place of consideration rather than desperation. Most people have no idea this even exists, this entire cognitive gear that only unlocks when your financial foundation is genuinely solid.
But let's talk about the math.
Because the psychology is only half the story. Think about it this way. $50,000 invested in a broad index fund averaging 8% annually, conservative, not crazy, becomes roughly $108,000 in 10 years without you adding a single additional dollar. That is your money doing the work of a part-time job completely silently while you sleep, while you eat dinner, while you're sitting in traffic. But here's where it gets really interesting. That same compounding math that looks modest at 20,000 starts to feel almost violent at 50,000. The absolute dollar gains in years 7, 8, 9, we're talking $4, $5, $6,000 in growth in a single year on autopilot. For someone who spent years scraping together a few $100s a month in savings, that number is genuinely hard to process. And this is exactly why the 50,000 threshold is such a psychological inflection point, not just a financial one. Because for the first time, you are no longer the only one building your wealth. The money itself becomes a co-contributor. Your savings stops being a static number you have to protect and starts being a dynamic, self-expanding asset. The difference between a $10,000 account and a $50,000 account isn't just quantity, it's category. It's like the difference between a bicycle and a motorcycle. Yes, they're both transportation, but one of them takes you to a completely different set of destinations.
Let me give you a real-world example that I think about constantly. Imagine you're at your job and your boss lowballs your annual review, offers you a 2% raise when inflation is running at 4%. If you've got $3,000 in savings, here's what happens in your brain. Your threat system fires. You do a quick calculation of how long you can survive without income, the number is short, and you smile, nod, and say thank you. You negotiate from fear, which means you don't negotiate at all. Now put $50,000 in your savings account. The same meeting, the same lowball offer, but now your brain runs a completely different calculation. You have at least a year, maybe more, of living expenses secured.
The conversation shifts from "I need this job" to "I deserve better than this offer." The physiological experience of that negotiation is different. Your voice doesn't shake, your palms don't sweat as much, and the research on salary negotiation is crystal clear. People who negotiate from a position of security get dramatically better outcomes than people who negotiate from desperation. $50,000 in the bank is literally a negotiating asset, even when it never comes up in the conversation.
Here's where it gets really interesting from a career perspective specifically. Below a certain savings threshold, you are effectively locked into your current situation, not by contract, not by law, by mathematics. You cannot afford the gap between jobs. You cannot afford a bad month during a business launch. You cannot afford to say no to an opportunity that pays slightly less but leads somewhere significantly better. But here's the truth that most people in the personal finance space don't say out loud. $50,000 is roughly the number where that lock starts to open. Not fully, not forever, but enough. Enough to take a calculated risk. Enough to walk away from something that isn't working. Enough to bet on yourself in a way that was financially irrational before, but is now, finally, financially defensible.
Now, there are some real warnings I want to give you here before you start treating 50,000 like a finish line, because that's one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. The first trap is lifestyle inflation the moment you feel safe. The safety that comes from hitting this threshold is real and earned, but it is also fragile. People who hit 50,000 and immediately upgrade their apartment, their car, their spending baseline have not hit 50,000. They've reset back to survival mode with better furniture.
The second trap is hoarding instead of investing. Cash sitting in a savings account earning 2% while inflation runs at 3% is a wealth destruction strategy. The power of this threshold only activates when that money is deployed into assets that compound. If it's just sitting there, you are slowly getting poorer while feeling safe. That's arguably worse than not having it at all, because at least when you're broke, you know you need to do something. The third trap, and this one is subtle, is comparing your $50,000 to other people's financial positions and deciding it's not enough to matter.
Social media will do everything in its power to make your genuine progress feel insignificant. Some influencer will post their $1 million portfolio and your 50,000 will suddenly feel like a rounding error. Don't fall for it. The compounding math doesn't care about anyone else's account. Your 50,000 in 10 years at 8% is your $108,000. That's not a consolation prize. That's a life-changing sum that didn't exist before you decided to build it.
Look, hitting 50,000 in savings isn't going to make you rich overnight, but it will fundamentally change how you think about money, opportunity, and your own identity in ways you genuinely cannot predict from the other side. The brain you have at 50,000, less cortisol, more cognitive bandwidth, clearer long-term thinking, is a more capable brain. The career you build from 50,000 in the bank, negotiating from safety, taking calculated risks, walking away from what doesn't serve you, is a more powerful career. The person you become when money stops being your primary source of daily anxiety is worth more than the $50,000 itself. Start building that foundation today because your future self is counting on the decision you make right now.